bloody hunt, very difficult to kill. These are junior narco-terrorists that debated the U.S. Congress. But these are some of the local kids holding up crops that the U.S. government has killed. And this is an important picture to keep in mind because it's these people, it's these kids, both in Colombia and Afghanistan, who have to decide not to join the guerrillas, not to join the Taliban. And to, instead of saying that the state offers you a better way out, these people who have been historically abandoned by the government, they live in very rural areas where there's basically no state presence, very few roads, electricity, hospitals, police. They've been historically just abandoned by the central governments. And the first meaningful interaction they're getting with the government takes the form of helicopter gunships that protect the spray planes, and crowd busters, and these right-wing paramilitary death squads that come in advance of the army to kill suspected guerrilla sympathizers. And so they're willing to associate the state and the United States with death, destruction, and suffering. This is not a good way to win hearts and minds when you consider that Colombia has been in a civil war for more than 4 decades. Since the 1960s, the year I was born. I can't say which year that is, but 60. And there's also a lot of human health effects as well. If you overlay the pattern of our fumigations and the incidences of skin rashes, diarrhea, vomiting, infant deaths, it's a striking correlation. The U.S. Embassy says, oh, well, these people live in a damn humid jungle. It's probably a fungus they picked up or something. Because we can't prove this in a court of law. No one was there to study these people while they got sprayed, measure their dosage, and prove causality. It's a very dangerous area to be working in, so there are not a lot of volunteer doctors go out there to observe these people. And so this is how the embassy responded to this and said, it's not us. This woman, again, she was sprayed a week before I met her, and you can see some of the rashes on her skin. Here's a picture of the baby that got sprayed. A lot more infant deaths because they have such low body mass and they can't absorb as much of this chemical. Briefly, we're going to move to down south a little bit and up in elevation, a couple thousand meters. This is Bolivia. It's one of the most beautiful countries in the world, but it's also some of the highest terrain, inhabited terrain. This is close to about 15,000 feet, or about 4,500 meters. So the air is very, very thin up here. People live up there. You can see some of the houses and stuff. You're literally at the top of the world. And in order to survive at these altitudes, Bolivians, particularly indigenous people, have for thousands of years chewed coca. Coca, if you chew it, doesn't make you high. In fact, you don't notice a whole lot. Maybe a little numbness in your cheeks, but it's more what you don't feel. You don't feel the altitude. You don't feel the cold as much. You don't feel as hungry, which is useful if you can only afford 2 meals a day. And you don't feel as thirsty. And water is very scarce here. And so coca is something that helps these people survive. In fact, here's about 13,000 feet elevation. You can see the tree line down here, and above that, they're farming. Imagine carrying a sack of potatoes at altitude. It's absolutely exhausting, but it's also just backbreaking work. At that altitude, it's just unbelievable. And this woman, fairly old, but you see a lot of Bolivians carrying these kinds of things on their back. Use a blanket. It's a universal backpack down there. But they'll carry huge loads on their backs like this. And a lot of Bolivians also work in the mines. Mining is what will put Bolivia on the map. And some of the richest silver deposits in human history have been mined in Bolivia. And in order to mine at these altitudes, a lot of people need to chew coca. Basically, you have to. And again, it's a very cold, very stark, very tough environment. In this case, one of his, there'll be a miner eventually, but right now he's selling coca in the mines, and water, and that sort of thing. Also, if you live in La Paz, Bolivia, the capital, that's about 12 to 13,000 feet elevation. And the air is so thin up there when you first land, the plane door opens and it decompresses. You know you're pretty high at that point. And you can either adjust and get this terrible headache for the first day or two you're there, or you can chew coca or drink coca tea. And in fact, the U.S. Embassy's own website recommends coca tea for traveling to Bolivia. Really double standard here, right? And so, and with the election of Evo Morales a little over a year ago, he was the head of the coca growers union in Bolivia, and his policy now is cocaine no, coca yes. And so he wants to fight the war on traffickers and organized crime, but to leave coca, a traditional crop. And so this is a farmer and some of her kids, with a couple of my friends here, standing in her coca field. And now they're beginning to regulate the coca, which is something that I've been trying to advocate for many years now. And the fierce battles they fought with previous governments have ended with a lot of bloodshed, people were killed, and they finally have an agreement with the government now that every family who belongs to a coca grower union is allowed to grow what's called a cato. It's a traditional unit of measure, about 40 meters by 40 meters. And that is enough to give a family roughly about $70 to $120 per month to survive on, which is not a lot of money, but it's much better than what they had before. And they're able to regulate this voluntarily. There wasn't any cooperation with the drug war eradication teams. Previously, they've been shooting, fighting each other, occasionally shooting each other. Now they're working cooperatively for the first time. It's an amazing thing. When I met with some of the colonels who were previously living on people's plants and stuff, and now they're saying we're working with these unions, and they're identifying which families have excess coca, and they're pairing it up voluntarily ahead of us. We don't even have to do this work anymore. They're self-regulated because, number one, they're not stupid. They don't want to flood the market, which hurt all of them. But they also want every family to have an equal share in this. So there's a lot of promising things that are happening in Bolivia. Legal coca markets now. Here are the packing large sacks of coca leaf, dry coca leaf. And it just gets right in there. Big sacks of coca. But coca also is one of the few viable crops in these remote parts of the Andes. There are very few roads, very little infrastructure, and transporting hundreds of kilos of fruits and vegetables, legal crops, is very difficult to do. And so this is the main road into the Yungas Valley, which is the traditional coca growing area in Bolivia. It's also called the Road of Death. Actually, we took this road. It's a one-lane road carved into mountainsides, and it goes on for about 3 hours around this road. It's the most dangerous road in the hemisphere. About every 2 weeks, one vehicle plunges off the side of these roads. And so, transporting coca, and in Colombia, it's more flatter terrain, but also very, very remote. Very few roads, mostly dirt paths for mules and motorcycles and stuff. And so, transporting coca is very easy to do, or coca paste is easy to do. But transporting lots of pineapples and potatoes and vegetables is extremely hard to do. And so, for that reason, it's difficult to talk about alternative economic development if these regions have never had basic development to begin with. You can't tell people to grow other crops without giving them the access to the markets they need to survive. Basically, that's I'll wrap up